Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Compliance versus Culture, Broadening Your Process Safety Knowledge, presented by Mikaela Dressendorfer, Brian Norrie, Todd Drennen, David Black, Darren Malik, and Amy Theis. I will have each presenter introduce themselves and share their role and location within BakerRisk. We'll start off with Mikaela.
Hi, everyone. Mikaela Dressendorfer. I'm the BakerRisk Learning Center coordinator and manager, and I sit out of our Houston office.
Excellent. Thank you. Brian.
Yes, hello. My name is Brian Norrie. I'm a principal consultant and fire protection supervisor, and I'm based in the Process Safety Group in Houston, Texas.
Awesome. Thank you. Todd.
Hi, everyone. I'm Todd Drennen. I'm a supervisor in the Process Safety Group based remotely from my home in Pennsylvania outside of Philadelphia.
Thank you, Todd. David? If you're talking, you might be muted.
We were supposed to not do that. My name is David Black. I am the manager of the Fire Protection Service area, as well as the Insurance Risk Service area for BakerRisk, and I am based in Houston.
Thank you, David. Darren?
All right, my name is Darren Malik, based out of San Antonio in our corporate office.
Thank you. And Amy?
Good morning. My name is Amy Theis. I'm a principal engineer based in our Chicago office.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Today, our presenters are going to present insights to safety professionals in search of expanding process safety knowledge through a preview of our BakerRisk Learning Center, which we refer to as BRLC course content. The webinar will greatly benefit technicians involved in projects, operations, facilities, and consulting to support their respective teams and/or clients. They're going to cover the distinct process safety areas that technicians and safety professionals should be aware of, why safety professionals are highly encouraged to obtain the latest process safety knowledge and skills, and why continuing education of process safety subject matter will ensure that safety professionals are better equipped to identify and treat hazards, facilities, or client projects. Now, before we start, I do want to go over a few housekeeping items. Please type any questions that you have into the Q&A box in your Zoom control panel. Our technical staff will respond to those questions via text in the chat. Finally, at the close of our webinar, please provide feedback by responding to our survey. We're excited to have our experts present today, so without further ado, I'll turn the time over to Mikaela Dressendorfer to get us started.
Awesome. Thank you, Naomi, for the introduction. I just briefly introduced myself before, but my name is Mikaela Dressendorfer, and as the BakerRisk Learning Center, or BRLC coordinator and manager, I help to manage and oversee different trainings that we give. Today, I'll be setting the stage for what we'll be discussing today and really try to explain why it's so important to continue to broaden and expand on your process safety knowledge. There are two terms that many of you are probably very familiar with in your roles or at your facilities: compliance and culture. Dictionary definitions say compliance is the state or factor of according with or meeting rules and standards, whereas culture, as defined by the American Institute of Chemical Engineers, is the combination of group values and behaviors that determine the manner in which process safety is managed. One of these is seen as more regulatory or check the box, while the other is more specific to each organization. But what if they were blended together? Building a culture of compliance means embedding the ethical behavior, accountability, and legal adherence into an organization's DNA, moving beyond simple box checking to a shared proactive commitment at all levels. It involves fostering an environment where employees prioritize the integrity, feel safe to report concerns, and also follow policies, which in turn significantly can reduce risk. So how do organizations go about building this culture? Through leadership commitment, open communication, and active training. If you're attending this webinar, you're probably already understanding the importance of process safety in your organization or your facility, but there may be some elements or areas of process safety that could be falling victim to three different areas. Maybe your systems themselves are taken for granted and always expected to work as intended. Maybe in the past they were treated as just a check the box activity. Or perhaps your technology is newer, or there are hazards that are simply underestimated by management or team members of their true hazards. Today, we'll be sharing some samples of 5 of our different BakerRisk courses, and that will help address one or more of these 3 questions. We have on our panel 5 subject matter experts with a combined total experience of over 125 years. And next, you'll be hearing from each of them a little bit about their subject area, why it's important to process safety, and get a brief look into examples of what each course may cover. I'll go ahead and start by passing the mic off to Brian Norrie, who will discuss the natural hazards risk assessments.
Yes, thank you, Mikaela. Again, my name is Brian Norrie. I'm a process consultant in the Fire Protection and Insurance Risk Engineering Group based in Houston. And I spent the early part of my career working in the highly protected segment of the commercial property insurance industry as both a field engineer and an account engineer, honing my loss prevention skills evaluating natural hazard exposures. The latter part of my tenure has involved the same types of assessments at client locations in the hydrocarbon processing industries and, broadly speaking, throughout the energy industry. My work includes both site-specific desktop assessments and thorough field evaluations to identify and quantify exposures, vulnerabilities, and mitigative solutions. These evaluations can be performed to support site selection, greenfield project development, and or existing or operational locations. Mikaela, would you advance the slide, please? So on June the 10th in Houston, Texas, I'll be teaching an interactive course that will be presented in a module format and introduce attendees to the various natural hazard perils that you see. Being located in Houston, the conversation will undoubtedly be weighted towards flood and wind exposures, but I plan to poll the room and present the topics with a prioritization awarded toward class interests. We will discuss notable natural catastrophe losses that have impacted the energy industry and focus on associated event trends. Each course module will overview deterministic approaches to quantifying natural catastrophe exposures and include discussions on mitigative techniques, including incorporating natural hazard resilience into project design. We will also discuss best practices for natural catastrophe emergency response plans and why many severe weather plans are insufficient. I believe this course should be valuable for project managers, design engineers, natural hazard response plan administrators, and perhaps even risk managers who are interested in better understanding natural hazards, enhancing resilience, and improving response plans. Mikaela, please advance the slide. This slide is a teaser of sorts, but it helps to visualize some of the main reasons the natural hazard exposures deserve attention. Historically, many property insurance carriers have reported natural catastrophe exposures, but not engineered the risk in perhaps the same way as other exposures, such as fire risk, for example. However, as you can see, the aggregation of the natural hazard event costs can impact an enormous geographic area and in some cases expose multiple sites to the same exposure while also causing enormous business interruptions with possible knock-on effects, such as interdependent and contingent supply chain disruptions. Not only is extreme weather becoming more prevalent, but the site development and insured values inside exposed areas continue to increase. This slide displays the costliest U.S. hurricanes and interestingly includes a Category 1 storm, which is Hurricane Sandy, a Category 2 storm, Hurricane Ike, a Category 3 storm being Katrina, and 6 Category 4 storms, meaning that we cannot always assume that smaller storm events will lead to smaller disasters. Mikaela, the slide, please. I'll conclude by letting everyone know that the Center for Chemical Process Safety, or CCPS, in 2019 released a monograph that provides guidance on natural hazard assessments and planning. There is now an expectation that process safety management programs, notably PHA analyses, consider natural hazard vulnerabilities. This slide highlights Chemical Safety Board findings from 2 recent notable events. The Arkema flood event occurred during Hurricane Harvey in 2017, and the BioLab wind loss was a result of Hurricane Laura in 2020. BakerRisk is able to assist clients with these site-specific assessments and promotes engineered solutions to harden facilities and related infrastructure. For anyone wanting to learn more in the interim about natural hazards, please use the QR code on the slide to get more information and sign up for the June 10th course. That will take place at BakerRisk's Houston, Texas office. Thank you, everyone, and I hope to see you in class. I would like to now pass the torch to Todd Drennen so that he may discuss overpressure protection and pressure relief devices.
Thank you very much, Brian. All right, well, moving on here to overpressure protection and pressure relief devices, I will be the instructor for a course at our Houston office and virtually May 13th and 14th of this year. I've 21 plus years of experience in the industry, focusing primarily on pressure relief systems and PHAs and LOPAs, along with some functional safety audits and some other things. I have a PE from 3 states and proud alum of Drexel University in Philly. Go Dragons. Anyhow, so moving on into the technical topics, we often talk about relief devices as the last line of defense. And if you look at the hierarchy of controls approach with which we're all familiar, that is how it sets up. But a lot of times we don't look at how many different types of bad things relief devices can prevent. In addition to overpressure and mechanical damage to piping and equipment, we're of course protecting personnel from injuries and fatalities, but we're also preventing loss of material, loss of production time, and environmental releases. And you can see here a cutaway view of a spring-loaded pressure relief valve, commonly used in many industrial settings. Next slide, please. So relief valves, we have mandates for them from national, state, local requirements. We have industry codes, standards, and even best practices. And we have client internal corporate requirements as well that we see throughout the industry. Also, we have the example of several major incidents that have occurred over the years that have involved either the inadequate design or isolation installation of relief devices. So, for example, BP Texas City in 2005, you had a liquid relief to a blowdown drum that resulted in an overfill case that led to a BLEVE, or actually, no, a vapor cloud explosion, excuse me, not BLEVE. Vapor cloud explosion as a result of not having the proper systems to deal with that liquid release and send it to a place that it could be disposed of safely. T2 Laboratories in 2007, that was a runaway reaction case where the rupture disk was on the reactor was set based on the MAWP of the reactor vessel, which seems reasonable except for the fact that there was an undesired side reaction that happened at the relieving conditions and resulted in a relief load greater than what the rupture disk could handle. If they had set the rupture disk burst pressure lower, they would have been able to avoid that undesired side reaction and then have a rupture disk adequately sized to relieve the pressure. And then Williams-Geismar in 2013, which involved improper isolation of a heat exchanger, a reboiler, from its pressure relief system, such that it was blocked in, isolated, and there was no relief path to a device to relieve that pressure, and you ended up having an explosion of that equipment. We hear, back one slide, and you see here some images of the Texas City incident from 2005. All right, next slide, please. So now let's talk about the topics we're going to cover in the course. We're going to start with an introduction to relief systems, which will probably be review for a lot of the folks in the industry, but maybe not. We're going to talk about the applicable codes and standards that we need to work with. We're going to talk about a general work process for relief system design and each stage of that process. We're going to go through some relief device terminology where in a lot of cases people use some terms interchangeably when there's actually a difference that can be important in what those terms mean. And then we're going to look at the causes of overpressure and some techniques for determining relief loads for a variety of different scenarios that some of which would be common throughout multiple industries. Others might be more appropriate, more applicable to certain industries versus others. So next slide. Then we'll finish with relief device sizing and selection, installation and isolation. So the practical aspects of how you set up the relief systems in the field, how you install them, how you isolate them. We'll look at reaction forces, noise, and vibration. We'll look at relief device maintenance and inspection because like any safeguard or IPL and LOPA, relief device is only as good as the maintenance practices used to keep it in working order and ensure that it's operating as designed. And then finally, we'll wrap up with looking at how we deal with pressure relief systems in HERA studies. So, for example, PHA and LOPA, as well as in audits, whether they be risk-based or compliance-based audits. Finally, if you are interested in more information, or especially if you're interested in taking the course, please scan this QR code, and looking forward to seeing you May 13th and 14th in Houston or virtually. Thank you very much. Oh, and now I will turn it over to David Black, who will discuss fire protection with you guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Hello, everybody, and hopefully I remembered to unmute this time. In keeping with the overarching topic of the webinar, talking about culture and driving to a higher performance culture as opposed to maintaining more of a compliance sort of mindset, I wanted to focus on one specific course that we've developed and delivered around the topic of fire protection and emergency response management. So this is really aimed at the people who can help drive those cultural improvements, and the topics in this course are really tailored to that. Go ahead, Mikaela, next slide, please. Just keep in mind, we have a lot of different courses we can do, but this one is the one I think that best fits the overall topic. Just to recap, I think we went over most of this. A couple of other things to point out. I do stay active in API Safety and Fire Protection group, as well as NFPA and another industry group called the Risk Engineers Energy Forum, which is largely composed of insurance risk engineers that are practicing in the energy, chemical, petrochemical, and related fields. A lot of knowledge sharing that we get to do. So it's a combination of personal experience and acquired experience by listening to what others go through as well. So just a little bit more about my perspective and how I come into this. Next slide, please. So this course I want to talk about, fire protection or management of fire protection systems, focuses really on cultural issues largely, but specifically we're looking at organizational issues that can be, either reinforce or unfortunately often challenge the effectiveness of fire protection emergency response and overall readiness. Key management programs that may be applied well in certain areas of a facility, but don't necessarily translate as well to fire protection emergency response types of assets and resources, and help the folks in the plant or in different facilities or even other consultants who might be involved identify and tailor means to actually do some auditing and oversight on activities that take place that support the readiness and effectiveness of function of these systems. I'm not going to go through all of the details on this list because I'll touch on those again, but fire protection systems, one of the things we talk about is the organizational alignment and how that can really be a benefit, or unfortunately, in a lot of cases, it can create a lot of conflicts in how fire protection emergency response assets are maintained. If you consider the fact that you may have different stakeholders or different groups responsible for funding and designing and specifying what systems go into a facility in the first place, and a different group that's responsible for inspection, test, maintenance, and overall upkeep of those systems, completely separate from the group that's ultimately going to use those systems, usually your emergency responders or fire brigade types of roles in the plant that are really relying on those systems to do their job and, frankly, to keep themselves safe. When you don't have good alignment or good communication between the different functions involved in those three sort of overarching activities, you're setting yourself up for a degradation of your overall readiness. Another issue we often encounter is the fact that a lot of plants do a great job with maintaining their safety critical systems that are directly connected to or a part of their process safety systems, safety instrumented systems, independent layers of protection, different, engineered mitigations that are there and connected to and integral to the process itself. But if you step 1 degree over and look at disconnected or supporting systems like fire protection, a lot of those programs don't get this, don't apply, or they're not applied with the same level of rigor or to the same degree. We see this quite often, and it's a gap that is fairly easy to address. We really spend a lot of time in the course talking about how to do that and where you get the most bang for the buck. Good example of that is management of change. It's not at all uncommon for systems to be changed, for equipment to be replaced, upgraded, for underground piping to be replaced, new systems installed to help protect an area or protect an asset. But the M.Sc programs don't usually, or I should say, don't as often get applied the same way they do to processing. One good place to see that, and I put a couple of photos on this slide, is in simple fire protection equipment, or things like your passive fire protection, fireproofing that's applied to equipment in the actual process. So pictures here are photos taken from actual visits and supporting projects that we've done for clients. And these two discrepancies didn't just turn up the day we had the camera. People had been walking past these, whether they noticed them or not. They weren't getting acted on. So we want to talk about inspection, testing, maintenance in the context of these other discussions and other overall topics. But I've got lots of case studies and examples and solutions ultimately designed into the course to help address these kinds of issues. And then really a point, and I'll kind of transition to the next slide with this, is a lot of times fixed protection systems maybe don't get considered with the same degree of importance that other emergency response assets like fire trucks and portable equipment and firefighter training receive. But there's a real good reason that maybe should be something that gets better emphasis. Next slide, please, Mikaela. So prevention of these events is always going to be the highest priority. It's the old adage, an ounce of prevention being worth a pound of cure is no less true here than anywhere else. But we can't prevent them all. And industry experience, the newspapers, seeing footage of a facility on fire, having an incident almost weekly in Houston, reinforces the fact that you can't stop them all from happening. So if you're going to have them, you need to be prepared for what to do about them. Just once a fire's going on, get very rapid spread. You can have a lot of bad things happen. Fixed protection is really the true first responder. It's the thing that is going to be there when you need it. It's going to act without human intervention if it's properly installed and designed. And it's going to buy a lot of time for the rest of the emergency response activities to be set up and put in place and take effect. Without it, you lose time. You potentially roll up on a fire that has grown much larger than the one you were first called out to respond to. Fixed protection is usually also more efficient than mobile apparatus or things like monitor streams because of the way it applies water. It's properly designed, and the automation, its response time is much better. So these are kinds of topics and specific examples that we cite in the course, with the ultimate goal of making sure that the site maintains whatever assets and resources it has at optimal readiness without conflict that's going to challenge its capabilities. Next slide, please, Mikaela. So the last points here really want to go over are just to recap the course a little bit. I won't revisit this too much, but specifically, we're going to spend time on how to ultimately, review the design of your protection and response assets and make sure it's designed and fit for purpose, how to maintain it in the condition of functionality that you expect it to provide when you need it. And ultimately, again, look holistically at all the different tools in your fire protection emergency response toolkit so that you're as ready as possible when that event actually takes place. We look at the organizational considerations, since those do tend to show up and be kind of a root cause to some of the proximate issues like poor repair, poor maintenance, poor oversight, poor management of change. Organizational challenges are often at the root of those. So we spend time looking at how to identify where those conflicts might exist and how to resolve them. Managing changes and especially temporary changes as you would apply to a fire protection system like an impairment is just as important on fire protection as it is on your process equipment. All the same principles and foundational concepts apply. They just don't often get applied in the facility. So we talk about how to make that happen and at least how to get the most out of what you are doing. Maintaining documentation is a big potential gap. So we spend a lot of time looking at what good looks like and always contrasting that with what we found in an industry to show what bad can look like. Give you the opportunity to calibrate where you are and where your facility is on those types of topics. And then we're going to give you a lot of good pointers on how to audit or check the activities around inspection, test, and maintenance of fire protection emergency response capabilities, whether you've got a maintenance team or utilities group in your facility that's responsible for that and doing that, or you contract that out to a third party. Someone in the plant needs to have the knowledge to know how to make sure that that job is being done correctly, being done at the right frequency to the best of that. So we're going to spend time talking about that. But as I said at the start, this is one course out of many that we can offer. We can go from to really basic and fundamental fire protection emergency response concepts. If you've got somebody new to the role who really needs to, start at the more of the beginning on getting that foundational understanding, all the way up to these more management tailored courses. If you're interested in the management of fire protection course, we have got that scheduled for June 9th. Time's running out, so I'd urge you to go and sign up for that or send the link to someone else in your facility who may benefit from this information, given the opportunity. And with that, I'd like to hand over the baton to Darren Malik, my good friend and colleague, who's going to talk about low carbon energy offerings. Thank you very much.
Thanks, David. Mikaela, you go to the next slide. All right, so I introduced myself at the start of the presentation, but just for more context as to why I'm engaged on the low carbon energy side of things at BakerRisk. Well, I did my bachelor's work in nuclear engineering because I thought it was a good low carbon energy solution, power solution. I was just, 16 years too early, I guess. And now nuclear is making a run at it again. And then my graduate work was actually on concentrating solar power. So I've been working in the low carbon energy space all the way since 2008 at Texas A&M. Mikaela, give it to the next slide. So within the context of BakerRisk, and I think general consensus, there's a broad array of power sources that qualify as low carbon energy. In general, there are things that are not traditional hydrocarbons. And we've got hydrogen and hydrogen carriers like ammonia and methanol on this list as well. Depending on what your flavor is, you may say that needs to be blue or green hydrogen. But again, the general concept here is these are all energy sources that release less carbon dioxide than your traditional oil or coal. You go ahead and go to the next slide. BakerRisk offers low carbon energy safety training across these low carbon energy sources. What kind of is the common thread that connects all of these is that they have a flammable or toxic component to them. And therefore, BakerRisk feels as if we have something to speak to with respect to those hazards. Some of these, like the hydrogen and ammonia, BakerRisk has been working in the with the traditional producers for decades. And now we're seeing newcomers to the market, and we're happy to apply the tools and techniques that we have from our traditional clients and provide training to people who are moving into this space. Biofuels, which is renewable natural gas, renewable diesel, sustainable aviation fuel, and things like that. again, the genesis of the molecule, whether it's coming from animal fats or soybean oils versus hydrocarbons, we still are making a flammable material that you intend to burn in an engine, and so the hazards are there. Batteries is definitely something that's emerging, and one of the example incidents that we'll show is the Moss Landing incident in California from a few years back, and then carbon capture and utilization is another one where we're pushing into higher pressures in order to move supercritical CO2 around. And those dispersions produce a dense phase gas that will go a long way. And so we feel like people need to be aware of those hazards. You can go to the next slide. As someone who has a nuclear engineering background, I feel very passionately that the reason safety and a culture of safety versus just strict compliance is important for low carbon energy is because a significant incident in one of these sectors is potentially market killing. If you have a large hydrogen explosion, as an example, you could see people walk away from hydrogen vehicles, hydrogen fuel cells, and things like that. And I view that as an issue that plagued the nuclear industry. It wasn't an engineering problem. It was a political and a public-facing problem, public relations problem that slowed down expansion of nuclear power coming out of Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island. On this slide, you see graphics talking about a fatality incident at a dairy that was making renewable natural gas, and then a large fire that occurred at a battery energy storage facility in California. These are the types of things that I'm nervous about. Once you have widespread adoption, people will accept that given 10,000 facilities, one's going to have an event every year. But early on in the growth of this industry, a significant incident would potentially crush the industry or cripple the industry or delay the industry significantly. And that's something that hopefully with our courses, BakerRisk is helping to mitigate or prevent. And you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So we have courses in each of these sectors. In general, we talk about the background of the hazardous material, whether that's the ammonia, the hydrogen, the electrolyte, and the batteries, and just kind of go through that basic background. We'll touch on previous incidents to try to drive home again that this isn't a theoretical concept or, oh, well, that's just a really unlucky bad day. It's, well, no, these technologies have hazards, even if they're coming from low carbon energy sources, and they need to be respected. And so that ties us into the key hazards and risk. But really what, again, we want to kind of drive down to is, well, what are the strategies for addressing those hazards? For specific materials, we'll talk about material compatibility because that can be a significant component of the hazards. If you're corroding through your pipe walls aggressively or your generation technologies allow breakdown of key components, people need to be aware of that. And then we'll try to touch on the future outlook of these and where we see the market going and talk through some of the challenges of going from a traditional energy system where you have trained operators interacting with it and then moving into a public-facing sphere. Go to the next slide. All right, and again, we have individual courses for these hazards. There's not or these low carbon energy sources. There's not an overarching low carbon energy session. However, if you wanted to take all of these, that would be great. But again, this is the current schedule for each of those individual courses. There's QR codes at the bottom. If there's one you're specifically interested in, it would be great to have you attend our course. And I will hand it over to Amy to talk about combustible dust hazards.
Thanks, Darren. So we are going to be talking about combustible dust and also our hazardous area classification training. We have this as a combo course that's coming up in June. So you can go to the next slide, please. So my background, I'm a chemical engineer, been in the process safety consulting business for more than 25 years. Specialty focuses on reactive hazards, flammable liquids, and combustible dust. So that's what we'll be focusing on today. You can go to the next slide. So this is a highlight from an incident that occurred in 2008. It was really the impetus for the OSHA NEP that focused on combustible dust. And so that's where OSHA really issued this national emphasis program and really trying to bring that to people's attention. You can see from this picture that quite devastating damage from this, and that's because the energy associated with these type of events can propagate through different pieces of equipment very quickly and cause a substantial amount of damage, which can result in a high amount of loss. So we want to be on the preventive side of this. So if we can go to the next slide, we'll talk about that. So some specific industries where we focus on in terms of combustible dust are agricultural and food. This would also include beverages, but typically more on the food side. So bakeries, any type of solids handling, flour, sugar, all of those types of things. Spices are also combustible. Metals, so this could be metal working or any type of raw material handling, or if you're generating metal due to grinding or other type of industrial operations. Wood processing, that's another area that we want to focus on for combustible dust. The sulfur industry, as well as plastics and resins. So this is going to be important in the processes these materials are made, can generate dust, and they need to be managed. And then you have the catch-all of everything else. So from raw material handling through the process to your final product, you want to make sure that if you have powders or particulates that are either being generated or being received as raw materials, that you're managing those in an appropriate way. Next slide, please. So if we look at incidents that have occurred in industry related to combustible dust hazards, we can see some of the OSHA issues that can be related to those. So the ones highlighted here in red are specifically related to combustible dust. So housekeeping, this is a really important one and can lead to those secondary explosions that we see that can cause so much devastation. This is because there's fuel in the area. The dust can serve as fuel. So once you have a breach of a component and then you have additional fuel in the area, this can really cause additional damage. The 1910-305, that's going to be our electrical component. So this gets into the wiring and electrical area classification. So if you don't have the correct infrastructure there, it can lead to potential short and damage for the equipment. And then the general duty clause. So this is typically what's referred to when companies are lacking explosion protection on equipment, usually cited under the general duty clause. So this is definitely important in terms of mitigating explosions in facilities. And then there is a specific grain handling standard by OSHA that would apply to particularly corn milling, but can apply to any grain. If you want to go to the next slide, please. And so then we have a variety of National Fire Protection Association standards. We have the overarching NFPA 660, which combines all of the commodity-specific standards that used to exist. So it's really helpful to kind of have a central source of information here for this. NFPA 68 and 69 talk about explosion protection and prevention, so we definitely want to do both. NFPA 77 gives us guidance on static electricity, and then NFPA 499 specifically talks about electrical area classification for combustible dust. So these are some focus areas that and guidance that are provided in industry and what we use when we typically evaluate equipment for combustible dust hazards. The other two here that come up fairly often and typically are referred to for a city code official, a local fire marshal, or someone like that if there's going to be new construction or you're modifying a facility to either add more equipment or make a major modification. They want to understand that the fire and explosion hazards due to combustible dust are being managed. And so they want to understand, what does the owner operator have in place to be able to do that? So doing a dust hazard analysis is a good way to do that and be able to provide them some documentation to understand, these are our hazards, these are our safeguards, and we have the hazards adequately managed. So next slide, please. So this is the agenda for our DHA and hazardous area classification training. So we'll cover the fundamentals of combustible dust. This will give an introduction to the terminology and what can cause combustible dust fires and explosions. We'll talk about combustible dust management. So there's some specific management systems called out in NFPA 660 that are helpful in terms of how to kind of keep these hazards under control, including maintenance and inspection programs, training, explosion protection, all those types of things. We're going to talk about that. We'll talk about combustible dust hazard analyses. So I've mentioned this before. This is really a structured approach to documenting the hazards of your process and the safeguards you have in place to mitigate those. And then we'll talk about fundamentals of hazardous area classification. So this is important to kind of manage those electrical hazards and make sure that those are properly mitigated as well. We'll talk about how to do a combustible dust hack study. And then we also include workshop activities. So we want to put that into practice and give our attendees some practice on how to actually implement that. So we'll walk through a few examples. We do also have a course that is specifically only for the combustible dust aspect. So if you're interested in that, please let us know. The course that's coming up on June 4th is a combo course. So it's going to cover both the combustible dust and the hazardous area classification. And with that, I will turn it over to Mikaela, who will wrap us up.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. So I really just want to take a few moments to kind of summarize what was all discussed. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the goals of the trainings are to really help build that culture of compliance in your organization, your teams, and your projects in order to help everybody identify and better understand the potential hazards that you're dealing with, understanding your systems that you have in place to protect against those hazards, and ultimately try and make a safer environment for everybody. And so that when they come to work, they leave the same way, in one piece and safe. Ultimately, what we try to gain from our trainings is learnings from our subject matter experts or SMEs who can provide the participants with really holistic and informative viewpoints from all of their years of experience and expertise in their respective fields. And then ultimately, I did want to mention too, apart from the public sessions that we've highlighted, we do also offer customized or private training. If there's any specific company standards or examples or needs that your organization has, we can also help support that as well. I think that concludes the rest of our presentation segment, so we can open up the floor for a couple of questions and Q&A.
Excellent. Thank you, Mikaela. I'm going to go ahead and ask some questions that did come up during the presentation. And as a reminder to our attendees, if you haven't already done so, type those questions into the Q&A box in the control panel. So I know you touched base. Some of the questions that did come up are a little, generalized, but here we go. How does one sign up? I know y'all shared some QR codes, but how else can one sign up for courses?
Yeah, great question. I forgot to mention when I had this slide pulled up, but I do have our main Learning Center page linked here. So you can go directly to our website and sign up for the courses directly on the website for whichever course you're interested in. If you're having issues navigating the website or want to have further questions about the content or logistics or a custom course option, you're always welcome to reach out to us. We have our email address provided here as well that you can contact for additional information.
Excellent. And then that leads into classes being offered virtually in person. I know both were mentioned. Can you just clarify some of that for the attendees?
Sure. So we find in today's learning age, more and more reasons for people to take virtual courses, whether it be a constraint in the time that they have to travel or maybe cost of traveling to attend a course in person. So
Right.
while we recognize the importance and benefit of having that face-to-face learning opportunities, we also recognize the benefit of having virtual options as well to cater to different time zones and needs in people's schedules. So a lot of our trainings are offered in that hybrid format to help accommodate for those reasons.
No, that's great. I'm excited that we do that and offer both options, right? Um, what if there's a company or um, what if there's a large group? You know, I know you touched on private courses. What do we need to do about getting people signed up if there's a large group or multiple attendees?
Yeah, great question. So the first and best thing to do is always to reach out, let us know what you're interested in. If you have a large group that you want to train, some clients want to train an entire facility worth of people, and others want to just train a handful of a smaller team. And so having an idea of who you want to train, how many people you want to train, and most importantly, what are you hoping to get out of the training and what type of scope of topics and key areas of focus may you want to have for your training? Those are all questions that we talk through and work through in the early stages of looking when we look at doing a customized or private training course,
Mhm.
and ultimately all things that we can generally help with meeting your needs and expectations.
That's great. What does one get for completing a course?
So apart from the knowledge of the specific training, of course, we also do provide attendees with certificates of attendance. Those will be sent out via email, where you'll be able to download as a PDF, attach as a um, completed certificate in your LinkedIn profile, or share on LinkedIn if that's something that you're interested or like to keep up to date. We also will provide you with the materials that were discussed during the training, so that you'll have those as a reference for your future, roles and or projects in your organization.
Excellent. And I assume PEs and CEs are included.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. That's a great point. For each certificate, we'll list out your professional development hours or PDH hours, as well as if your certification body uses continuing education units or CEUs. We also have those listed out on the certificate. That we find that makes the submittal process and everything that you need to do to keep track of and take those credits for your PE or additional certificates much easier if you have those all spelled out on your certificate with the other requirements.
Great. Thank you, Mikaela. It looks like we've only covered, a few of the questions that were asked during y'all's presentation. So to our attendees, if you have additional questions, again, type those into the Q&A box. I'm going to ask one more question before we conclude the webinar, but where can one get more information on other courses that weren't discussed today? I know we went over a few, and we have so many different service areas. So can you elaborate on other courses not discussed?
Yeah, definitely. So the best place to go again is our website Learning Center. We have a course catalog that shows our entire breadth of courses that we cover. Some other topics include facility siting, PHA or HAZOP, LOPA, process hazard analyses, risk assessments, process safety management topics that tend to come up, fire and gas detection, hazardous area classification without dust if you're looking for just hazardous area classification by itself, among others. We do have, it looks like a couple of minutes, Naomi, so I did want
Mhm.
to highlight one of our courses that's pretty unique. It's our
Yes.
hazard awareness training.
Mhm.
We have a facility just outside of San Antonio in Texas that we have the ability to perform testing of different fire or explosion or structural analyses And as part of that training, we offer the chance for your attendees to see live demonstrations of these events. It can really give um, your organization perspective on just what the hazards look like that you're dealing with. You hear about fires, you see them in the news, but getting to see firsthand in a controlled setting what the fire feels like on your face, or the explosion feels like as it happens is another altogether. I do have some kind of cool videos. I don't know if you'll be able to hear the sound, but this one is an explosion video, an example. I'll let it play again. So pretty cool. And then we also have a fire video of a liquid jet fire, for example. I was lucky enough to attend this course a couple of years ago when I first started working at BakerRisk, and it remains one of the coolest courses I have ever taken myself, as well as attended and helped coordinate it on the flip side of things now. So
Yeah, and I can attest to that. Luckily, I have an opportunity to assist our staff and our presenters at those courses. So, yes, feeling the heat on your chest, feeling the booms and bangs, and just the education, right? You get the educational experience in the classroom, but then you get to go see those real live demos. It's world, and always positive feedback from attendees saying, man, you always, like you said, hear about these things, but actually seeing it in person and feeling, and it's amazing. So if anybody gets an opportunity, I'd love to meet you out there. Yes, so thank you for showcasing that, Mikaela.
awesome. Thank you, Naomi.
Awesome. Well, if there's nothing else, thank you to our presenters today. All of you did a wonderful job. And we look forward to our attendees asking any other questions before you log off. Put those in the Q&A box. Our presenters will answer those questions, and we'll send that out and post your responses via email, newsletter. We'll put it on LinkedIn, and also update our BakerRisk website, which will also have the links to the recorded webinar, slides from today's presentation, and the answered questions from today. Thanks for joining us. Fill out the survey, and our next webinar will be modeling of explosion hazards with hydrogen and hydrogen natural gas blends. That'll be presented by Darren Malik, who is here today. That'll be on May 26th. So until then, enjoy the rest of your week, and thank you again to our presenters. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.